everybody, Sean Frangella here with a new Cinema 4D tutorial, and in this episode we're going to talk about how to make this stack of bricks build out using MoGraph and then knock them down with dynamics. So you get all philosophical here and think that creation is destruction or something like that too, but really these are just two of the funnest things to mess around with in Cinema 4D. So we'll start in Cinema 4D and build this out, and if we look at our finished file, here's what we got going on with the bricks stacking and then knocking down and this text appearing and then bouncing off. And we'll texture our scene with this cool 2D looking flat texture, which is super trendy right now. And then we'll bring this into After Effects and talk about doing a couple little post things like adding the blurs and the vignette. So let's get started in Cinema 4D. I'm gonna make a new file. And first I'll set up my render settings so we get this to the right aspect ratio. So I'll grab this and change the physical renderer and go to output 1920 by 1080 so we can do HD. And we'll turn on ambient occlusion, which we'll get back to a little later with tweaking that a bit to get that cool look. And to get this lined up and centered how it is in that shot, I'll just grab a camera and pop into that camera and then just zero out all the rotation so it's flat on there. Just pull up so we can kind of see our scene and then just pull back a bit. So then when we start to make objects, they're sitting in the middle of our window. So what do we need to get started? Well, we need some bricks. Unfortunately, flat textured bricks are really just cubes. So what I'll do is I'll just grab a cube, and under object, we need this to be a rectangle. So what I'll do is leave this at 200 and then do a 35 so it's shorter and 125. And then we can just zoom in so we get that about the right scale. And we want this to be a little rounded so it's not so sharp. So what we want to do is add a fillet radius so it's a little bended, and I'll turn on my lines shading and drop this down a bit, so we'll go to like 4. So we need a bunch of these bricks and we need them sitting on a ground. So let's get this into a cloner and get one set of bricks. I'll go to MoGraph cloner and then I'll just drop this cube in and then we get a stack of bricks. What we want to do is change this to grid, and then we can change this up as many as we need. So I'll go to 7 and then 1 and 1 because we only need one stack. And I'll just scale this up so they're not overlapping and almost barely touching. And if we just wanted a straight stack of bricks going up, we could just add more on Y. But I really like this staggered idea and getting more specific. So what we can do to rebuild that is we'll duplicate this whole cloner by holding command and dragging up, and then I'll just pull the second cloner on top of it. And now what I can do with the second one is just scale the cube down a bit. So I'll go to like 160, and then in the cloner, I'll add another count on X and maybe drag that back up just so they're close in size, and then just work those so we get this nice little overlapping thing, which is really just what I wanted. And now that we have our shot lined up, we can drop a protection tag on our camera if we want. So then I won't accidentally move it because I have this right on where I want it. And if I need to see my scene, I can just pop out of my camera for a minute and kind of see what's going on. So now we need to stack up both of these clone bricks and get them on a floor. So what we can do is take both of these cloners and drop them into another cloner. So I'll grab a new cloner as a container. I'll just drag both of these in, and now it's going to clone these stacks. So I can just turn up the count as much as I want and then take this position Y to scale them back down and adjust the spaces in between. And what I want to do is have as many as I want. So we'll go to like 18. So that should about fill our frame. And then just make sure that these are close to intersecting but not overlapping. So it looks about right there. And then we can pop back into our camera. And cool, we got our stack of bricks. Now, if we want to get really close, we could just make sure that there's not any little spaces, which we could do by just taking either these sizes in and just making sure we're not leaving any little holes, and it looks like this is actually working. So we got our stacks of bricks. We're already on our way. We're getting going. Now we need to have them drop into place and then knock down. So we need them sitting on a floor. So what I'm going to do, since we'll be working with dynamics, is just grab a plane, and then I'll press T to scale this up. And I want to make sure that these are sitting right about on the floor and they're intersecting a little. So I'll just grab this whole cloner, pop into my front view, and then just move this whole cloner up so they're barely above the floor. So when we start playing around with dynamics, they're already sitting on the floor and don't have to kind of drop into place. All right, cool. So going a little fast, but we got our stack of bricks. We're getting going. Now let's have them drop into place. Well, what we want to do, if we look at our video, is rather than just all falling, kind of have this nice little falling and building from the center and then adding up. It's a nice little animation, and it's a little more interesting than just row by row. So what we can do to do that is add a plane effector, but to get it to work right and do each separate brick, what I found out it works best is if I grab these two inner cloners. So just grab this and Command or Control click to grab this one. And then I want to add an effector to these two. We go to MoGraph effector plane, and it's just going to look like it pops it down. But what we can do is keep it on position Y, but have it adjusted a lot so they start up here. And then rather than just animating straight down, because this is this whole container, what we can do is add a falloff. So we'll go to falloff sphere. And now if we move this, it's going to adjust the bricks, but it's way too small. It's only getting a couple. So what we can do is pop out of our camera if we want to kind of see our whole scene, and then just make this fall off really big by scaling it up with T. And if we make this bigger than the whole thing of bricks, now we can see they all end up in the air and they all go above our frame line. So now in our shot, we actually don't see any. We could scale it just to where they're out of the frame, about right there. And now if we animated this position Y, you can see that they go from there and start to fall and stack into place, following that shape and going in a little more interesting way and having the control to really keep it centered and let that center brick be the last one. So all we need to do to get this to work is just animate this position of this fall off. So if we just go to coordinate of this whole effector, keyframe on position Y, and then I'll just go ahead in time, let's say 70 frames, so a little longer than 2 seconds. And just pull this up now just to right above where they're exactly falling into place. So we'll get it right there and keyframe that on again. And now if I back up and play, you can see that they're dropping into place and it's kind of going backwards a little. So what we can do is kind of pull it up right to where they're stacking into place at the beginning. Make sure they're almost in frame, but not quite in frame. So right here, and then we'll do that. So it was just delaying a little. So now if we play, they all stack into place. And if we wanted this to start a little later, we could just adjust this position and update that keyframe by clicking this little keyframe icon. All right, so having some fun. We got them falling into place. They're all animating nicely. If we wanted our timeline to have a little more time, we could add some more here and just pull this out. And if we wanted this animation to take a little longer or shorter, we could just adjust that one keyframe. So let's say maybe it's 3 seconds. We could pull to 90. And if we want to change how big this effector is, we could just scale this down and it's going to make that adjustment. And we don't have to edit our keyframes at all because we're not animating that one. So cool, we got our bricks going. They're all stacking. They're falling into place, going pretty nice. Some cool little MoGraph tricks. So now what we want to do is add some dynamics so these can get knocked down. So while I was trying to figure this out, I was having a couple problems with trying to add it exactly to this one because we got MoGraph stuff going on. And if we put it on the cloner or on the cubes, it kind of gets a little messed up. So what we can do is go to the exact point where they're all built. So let's say frame 75. Have this whole cloner make a copy. So command and drag up. And then what we're going to do is shut off this one and shut on the second one and add dynamics to that one. And on these two cloners that we just made a copy, I'll delete that plane effector. So what I mean by that whole thing is what we can do is just turn on and off the cubes in the cloner. So let's say we just turn this whole second one off so we can see what we're doing. Frame 75, what we're going to do on the cubes is go to basic, and we can turn on and off this enabled thing, and then they'll disappear. So we'll leave it on and keyframe it for 75, and then at frame 76, we'll go one frame ahead, turn it off, update that, and you can see they turn on and off. And with our second one, we'll do the opposite. So these cubes, frame 75, they're off. One frame ahead, they're back on, and keyframe that. So it looks like nothing's happening, but what it's doing is turning on and off the second copy, and the second copy doesn't have MoGraph going on. We could add our dynamics. So what we could do now is just on the cubes in the cloner, inside the second cloner, we're going to add simulation rigid body. And again, I tried dropping these on the cloner. There's probably some setting that fixes it, but this works fine and it gets the job done. So then on these tags, we don't want them to just fall because they're all just going to fall uniformly. What we want to happen is change these to trigger on collision, and then we'll have something knock it over, and then they won't move until they're collided with. And then on our floor plane, we want to add a simulation collider body so they don't fall through the floor. Now again, if we play, it just looks like they stack into place and nothing happens yet. What we can do is have something knock into these. And in our example, what we got going on is they kind of build into place, and then after they're there, they're knocked down, and we see this text scaling up, and they even bounce around the text. And we could have the text animate with them, but it would all kind of come uniformly, and I really like this exploding from the center look. So what we can do to do that is just kind of get out of our shot a bit, and then I'm just going to add a sphere, and let's have this giant sphere in our scene, and we'll have this knock into the bricks, and we can change how they explode out depending on how big and how fast this is going, and then we can just hide it in visibility so we won't see it actually coming through. So on our sphere, we'll grab this and we'll animate this after they're all stacked up. So starting at frame 75, just have it move from the back through it. So let's check this on, and then we'll just go to frame like 90, pull it through, update this keyframe. So then we have this thing popping through our bricks. To get this to impact the bricks, we need to add another simulation tag. We'll go to simulation collider body, and this allows us to keep the keyframes and just use this for collisions. So now if I back up from the beginning play, they stack into place, awesome. And then when they switch out, this knocks through everything and they fall down. And we can change this whole simulation by just adjusting this sphere rather than letters or anything more complicated. So what we can do is just scale it up. So we can kind of see it didn't grab some of those top ones, and just play again and we'll get a different simulation. So that's working pretty well. I might just back it up a little and raise the whole thing up and then update this Z keyframe, and then we get all of them. So now we can play from the beginning, keep adjusting our animation if we want, and we can change this and how much they explode and fly the camera depending on how fast it's going and where these keyframes are. So that will do for that part. And then if we just want to not see this, we could turn it off here in visibility in render and editor, but it will still work with the dynamics if this is checked on. So we can just play and we still see it happening. So awesome. Let's just get our text in that kind of grows and shows up behind this, and then has it bouncing off, and then we'll do our texturing after we get the whole thing set up. If you're still watching at that point, to check out how to get that cool 2D look, and you're looking for more than just the dynamics, and you're looking for more than just these MoGraph tricks. All right, so let's keep going. Let's grab some text in there. So I'll just do MoGraph MoText, and I'll pull this back here, and then in my text, I'm just going to change this to something a little thicker so it fills our frame. So I'll go to my fonts, and I like this Helvetica New Standard, but you could use any font here. And then I'm going to center it in the middle and just line it up kind of right behind our bricks, and then we'll have it grow and move in front of them so they kind of bounce off the top. So what we can do is when everything starts happening at frame 75, animate the depth and the height so it gets bigger. So I'll just keyframe on both of these, depth and height, and we'll run ahead to say like frame 150 while these are going, and we'll make it way deeper, and we'll make it way bigger on depth, check that on, and then way taller with height, and check that one on. And then to get a little more interesting with the look of this, we can go to caps and change these to fillet cap, and that'll give us our nice bevels. And maybe do something else. Instead of convex, grab like two-step, and depending on how big this radius is, get more of these little chiseled looks. So that's a pretty cool one for this. I liked it because of the caps, so we'll just roll with that. So I can go 20 in the front and 20 in the back, and that's some cool looking text if I ever saw some. And then all we want to do is have it move in the frame. So same thing, we can go to coordinate just like we did on that sphere, and just have it move from here into place here, and then all the bricks that are moving will fall on top. And it's a bit thick, but whatever, we'll go with it. And then we just need that same collider body tag on this. So what we can do is just grab where we have it on our sphere, drag and hold command, and it's going to copy that whole tag. And it is a nice little trick if we know we just need the same dynamics settings. And last thing we want to do with this text is have it not be visible before we see this, before our wall is stacked up. So we'll do that same little enable on off trick right when the bricks change and they're stacked up. We'll go to our MoText basic, just shut it off, keyframe this on, go ahead one frame, and then just turn it back on. And then we get this nice little appearance of it after these are stacked up, and it's doing a little magic trick. So now if we pop back into our camera, back up, play, we get our bricks stacking, they explode out, and then our text scales, and we get nice little interaction with them falling on it. Now, if they're not working correctly because it's scaling, we might want to go to that tag and change shape from automatic to moving mesh, since it's an animating object. And if we want that to happen a little quicker, it's kind of going a little slowly, we just go to our MoText and drag all these little keyframes back in time, and it'll just happen a little quicker. So there's our nice little animation. We got it all going. These bounce off, and we got some text. Great. And let's just drag this up real quick so it's sitting on our ground. And since we just animated only one coordinate, it's not going to need us to update that keyframe. But if we render this, it's still all black and white and kind of boring, and we want to add those super cool flat colors to where it looks like it's a 2D thing, but then we get this perspective because it's actually 3D. So what we can do is make some quick textures for our text, our letters, and our background down here by making a new texture and double clicking this, and I could just call this light blue. And to get that look, all we're going to do is shut everything off and then check on luminance and just change the luminance color to a different color. So we'll go light blue and drag that onto each of our bricks and command drag to copy that tag. And that's going to give us this nice little flat color look. And you kind of just see the shape, but we see the shadows because ambient occlusion is on. And then we can just make a couple textures like that. So I'll duplicate this whole texture by holding our awesome global shortcut of command in Cinema 4D. Just call this dark blue, change it. And that's one thing I really love about Cinema 4D is there's all these awesome shortcuts like this. Just really copy stuff, duplicate it, and make things work really quickly. So we'll just drag that onto our floor. And now we can see we got this blue floor. And we need this to not be black. So what we can do is just make a background. Drag that same texture onto the background, and that's going to change our background color to that dark blue. And since we're just using the ambient occlusion for lighting, it's going to perfectly blend in. So same idea with the text. Let's make a white one for our text object. So I'll just duplicate this again, change this to white, change the luminance color to white, and we'll just back up and play this. We can see what this will look like when it blows it up with the text. And let's drag this white one onto this. And now if we just want one on just these caps, we can drag that other blue texture onto our text. It seems like it replaces it, but what we can do is change our selection on this text to R1, and that's going to texture only the front bevels. So pretty cool little thing, getting all sorts of little tips in this one. And last little thing in Cinema 4D we might want to do, if we play this and kind of pause on a frame where everything is in and do a quick command R to render, we can see that it's a little grainy, and I'm not really liking what's going on with the default ambient occlusion. And let's take a look at this frame. It's a little too much. And what I like to do with these sort of animations a lot of times is change that ambient occlusion a bit. So I'll go into my render settings, and rather than having it this much, I'll change the maximum ray length to just 50 so it won't go as far out. And we can even change the colors. So since it's a very blue animation, just change this to a dark blue. And it's going to be super subtle, but you can see that that helps to kind of minimize how far that ambient occlusion shading shadow is going and just give us just enough to see the geometry. So awesome. It's all working. We got our whole thing going. We're pretty much done. Now, the last thing I would want to do is add some motion blur on this because these things are moving really quickly. And there's a couple ways to do that and how you could go about it. So rather than rush through that, I want to handle that separately in the next follow-up video about how to add motion blur to 3D animation files, be it in Cinema 4D or in After Effects in post-production through a couple different effects and a variety of ways. Because that's kind of a whole topic on its own on about how to correctly add motion blur to 3D files and the routes you could go about it. So be sure to look for that follow-up video immediately following this one, and we'll go over that specific technique if you want to really get into the details of how to do that and add it in post-production. So I hope you learned a lot. This was a really fun episode to put together. And as always, you could check out some of my other tutorials on YouTube covering all sorts of stuff like Cinema 4D, After Effects, motion graphics, dynamics, and all sorts of cool things like that. As well as don't forget to subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/SeanFrangella, as well as hit me up on Twitter at SeanFrangella if you have any questions, requests for tutorials, and want to interact that way. And check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/Vital, or just search for that. It's under SJ Animate right now, but the URL is not over. Maybe it is in the future. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you learned a lot about blowing up brick walls and stacking them in place, or the opposite of that. I'll see you next time.